When you touch me, crazy. I'm crazy the way you love me, crazy.
Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back. This is a great show, I got to tell you, because we're going to be talking about a root that actually I've been using for well over 25 years now. And now we find out that it has some effects, beneficial effects for those who suffer from insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. And this is fascinating to me. I've been using it predominantly as an adaptogen, an ergogenic, and even to some degree, a nootropic. And I never realized it had this magic. And you're going to be surprised too, I promise you. This is really, really good research here. Before we get started, I had to clear my throat. We have to thank our title sponsor, and that is none other than Legendary Foods, makers of the Tasty Pastry. This is one dessert snack that you don't have to worry about your blood sugar going haywire, because Legendary Foods took the Pop-Tart and reimagined it. Less than 1 gram of sugar, 4 to 5 net carbs, 20 grams of high-quality dairy protein. There's nothing like it, and it's delicious. You'll eat it because it tastes so good. It really tastes like pastry. Like if you went to a bakery and you bought these, you would expect them to taste like this. And your kids will love them. And that's rare. You can't get your kids to eat something that's healthy just because it's healthy. It has to taste good. And your kids will love them, and you'll have to chase them around the house to get the last one out of their hand. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary. And instead of using our normal code, I'm going to ask people to use the code JAY. My friend Jerome works at Legendary Foods, and he has his own code that he gives people 15% off instead of the 10% that they get with our code. So I'm telling you to go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code JAY for an additional 5% off that we can't offer you. But do it soon, because this code is not going to be around very long. So check it out. Show them some love, but let them know that you heard about them here on Superhuman Radio, even though you're using JAY as the code. And now, without further delay, let me get my guest today is Dr. Mahtab Jafari, and she is with UC Irvine. She is a professor of pharmacy and pharmacological sciences. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
Pharmaceutical sciences, yes.
Pharmaceutical sciences. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to let the cat out of the bag. What we're talking about today is something that we've all known about, and many of us have taken it. I've taken it pretty religiously for the better part of 25 years because I notice that it does some beneficial things for me. And it's rhodiola rosea, or rosea. How do you pronounce it? Rosea or rosacea? Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong.
Rhodiola rosea.
Okay, thank you. The first question I have to ask is, why did you look at rhodiola for this reason? Were there some telltale signs, other research out there that made you think this is the next logical study?
So we have been working with rhodiola rosea in my lab at UCI for the past 17 years. So the study that you are interested in talking about today is really an extension of my previous research in fruit flies. And we showed that rhodiola improved health span in fruit flies, increased their lifespan, and it also modulated microbiome. And we
Really?
saw, yeah, so that this study is an extension of fruit fly study. So after the positive results that we observed in fruit flies, we decided to test rhodiola rosea in a mammalian system of diabetes.
Okay. So now I have to ask you, since you said the magic word microbiome, what does rhodiola do to the microbiome? I know there's bacteriodetes and firmicutes, and some are associated with leanness, and some are associated with obesity. Does it shift those populations of microbes in the gut?
So without getting into too much of the technicalities, what we know in fruit flies and in mice is that rhodiola shifts the microbiome of these animals, and obviously more recently in this mouse model. And for the lack of a better term, I would say it makes the microbiome healthier. And that healthier microbiome may contribute to the results that we observed in this study. And I also have to add that the microbiome makeup in fruit flies and mice are not exactly the same as humans, especially in fruit flies because it is quite limited. But it makes the microbiome healthier.
Interesting. And in both species, independent of the fact that they have very different microbiome populations. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so let's move forward to the study that we're talking about today. So you took rodents, and how was this study designed?
So what we did again, as you mentioned, it was a rodent study, and we used the mouse model of human type 2 diabetes, which represents an adult onset form of the disease that is associated also with obesity. And these mice, the mouse model that we use, they have a mutation that causes them to overeat. So they don't stop eating, they continue eating. And they subsequently develop a severe form of diabetes. And this severe form of diabetes obviously have an increased blood glucose levels. And that's why we chose this model. So what we did in this study is that we separated these mice into two groups. One group received rhodiola rosea, and the other group was a control group that didn't receive anything. And then we measured blood glucose levels. We tested the response of these mice to insulin injections, and we also checked their microbiome. So we characterized their gut microbiome. And finally, the last thing we did was we measured inflammatory markers or molecules in their blood.
I'm writing notes because I want to ask more questions after. So, what did you see in the rodents that were given the rhodiola? What tipped you off that it was helping with managing blood sugar?
So what we observed was that rhodiola treatment, the mice that were on rhodiola, they had lowered fasting blood glucose levels, and rhodiola also favored the response to insulin injections. And in those mice, rhodiola also changed and modulated the microbiome. And I mentioned the inflammatory markers, and something else that we observed was that rhodiola also decreased the levels of inflammation in these mice.
But what was that the intrinsic effect of rhodiola or the extrinsic effect of lowering blood sugar and making insulin receptors more sensitive?
So that's a very good question, and I won't be able to answer the question with a yes or no, because we didn't test that correlation. But what we observed was that the decrease in these inflammatory molecules was also associated with changes in the microbiome So we would like to think that because of the change in the microbiome, rhodiola decrease the inflammation, because as we all know, when we change the integrity of our gut or the barrier, we have more we can have more inflammation. I mean, I'm talking about in a negative way.
Yeah, right. Because the immune system is 80% is in the gut, and it produces inflammation. And so if you change the response of the gut, then you can lower inflammation. So I get it. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and this is why we thought that it was really exciting to see the changes in inflammation, because as you know, we have many studies that are published kind of suggesting that diabetes could be due to, could be worsened or could be due to inflammation. So
Right.
in this mouse model, we pretty much showed that.
Yeah, that was my next question. Could the improvements of insulin receptor sensitivity, been a result of the reduction of inflammation?
So it could be, although we didn't really check insulin receptors quantity and quality, so it was not a deep pharmacological studies. We were only looking at changes in the physiological changes or phenotypes, and what we observed was, as I mentioned, is that insulin injections in the mice that were on rhodiola rosea resulted in a decrease in insulin, so in glucose. So we may hypothesize that one of the mechanistic hypothesis would be that, the plant extract may very well modulate insulin resistance. But again, this is not something that we addressed in this study.
How was the rhodiola administered? In their water?
So we wanted to make sure that the mice were consuming rhodiola. So we didn't just put it in their food. We used a system that is called gavage. So we put rhodiola in a water, we mixed it with water, and we used a tiny little syringe and fed them with this system.
Pushed it down their throat into their tummy.
Yes.
Yeah. And were you able to calculate what the estimates in human doses would be? I know that's very difficult. And it also, we've learned a lot of things about rodents and humans, and quite often humans respond to much lower doses than rodents as well.
That is very true. And we kind of had a similar experience in this study. In our study, we dosed the mice at 25 milligram per kilogram of rhodiola rosea. And if you look at human studies that look at various pharmacological properties of rhodiola rosea, the doses go as high as 680 milligrams per day, for instance. So that translates, for a 60 kilogram person, that translates to be about 11 milligram per kilogram. So the dose that we used was more than double. But as you mentioned, this is a common challenge when you do rodent studies or using other mammalian systems for studies like that.
So was this rhodiola standardized for Rosavins, and what's the other one? It starts with an I. I can't think of the other component that's considered an active ingredient.
So as I mentioned, I've been working with rhodiola rosea for 17 years in my lab, and we absolutely standardized the extracts that we work with. So this particular extract had about 3.9% of rosavins. It's a collective group of molecules that is comprised of rosin, rosarin, and rosavin, and also selidroside. And it had about 1.9% selidroside.
Oh, and what percent of Rosavins?
3.9%, almost 4%.
So that's the standard over-the-counter supplement. I have been taking 600 milligrams of rhodiola first thing in the morning for years. I mean, I get it from Vitacost. Elisa buys it for me, my wife, and it's 200 milligrams a capsule, and I just take 3 of them in the morning before I train. That's fascinating. But I've always used it because of its supposed ergogenic benefits, but also its adaptogenic benefits. It's said to, balance the nervous system and all this other stuff. So this is really fascinating. So I guess the logical question at this point in time is, can you do a study on humans?
So the answer to your question is yes, I sure hope so. And hopefully that human study would be the logical follow-up to this study. So I am in the process of designing and also exploring options and research collaborators to do the human study. That is, again, a very natural and logical continuation and follow-up to this study. And we are going to look at the impact of rhodiola rosea again on the very same biomarkers that we did in mice. We are going to look at fasting glucose. We are also going to hopefully have the study longer. So this was a 4-week study. That is why we were so pleasantly surprised by seeing the dramatic results that we saw. But we are going to, in the human study, we are going to probably look at 3 to 6 months of rhodiola treatment. Because we also like to check glycosylated hemoglobin A1C.
Right. It would also be fascinating to have a washout period and continue to use insulin to see if insulin sensitivity returns back to the pre-treatment levels or if it stays there. That would be really fascinating.
That is a very good idea. That's a very good idea.
Yeah, because a lot of times, there's a lot of things, berberine, resveratrol. I mean, I remember we talked about a study about 7 or 8 years ago on the show that resveratrol was better than metformin, milligram for milligram, for controlling blood sugar. And but the problem was that once you stopped taking the resveratrol, if you weren't continuing to take it, everything kind of went back to normal. So that would be interesting to find out. So you've studied rhodiola for 17 years. That seems interesting to me because what was it about rhodiola early on that you thought, wow, this is an amazing compound. I have to know more about it.
So that's a very good question, and I wish I could tell you that I was so intuitive and so smart that 17 years ago I chose rhodiola to work with, but that is not the true answer. The true answer is that I started a very unbiased screening of various pharmaceuticals and botanical extracts that would increase the lifespan of fruit flies and improve their health span. Because the idea is not just to increase the lifespan and spend the last 20 years of our lives in a nursing home.
Right.
So I really wanted to make sure that the products, in this case, a natural product that I work with also improves health span. So through that screening process, rhodiola did really well. It increased the lifespan. And after we published our very first study in 2007, other labs around the world showed that rhodiola rosea actually increased lifespan in worms, in snails, and it was like the best compliment because it wasn't just us reporting lifespan extension with rhodiola rosea and also improving health span. So this is how it started. And rhodiola rosea is a fascinating plant. It only grows in Arctic and really harsh regions in the world. And I am pleased to announce that we now have rhodiola rosea agriculture in Alaska. So about 8 or 9 years ago, Alaskan farmers started to grow rhodiola rosea, and I am pleased to announce that I've been working with them very closely and testing the root extracts. And it takes about 6 years, 5 to 6 years for the root to mature. And now they seem to have a very good quality rhodiola rosea.
So it is the root. It's not the bark, right?
No, it is not it is the root. It's the root extract that is traditionally used in traditional medical practices. But I have to tell you, this is a little side story, that I worked with a brilliant high school student. At the time, she was a high school student who looked at the content of leaves and also barks of rhodiola rosea to see if we can find what we were just talking about, selidroside and rosavins in those. Her name is Sasha Ronagi, and she was able to identify these molecules also in the leaves and the barks of the plant extract. And we thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, because that gives more sources to get the magic compounds from. So that's exciting. So I've always, I have taken rhodiola in capsules. I've bought bulk rhodiola and taken it with spoons. And rhodiola shares a cinnamon, very mild, not as strong, but a cinnamon type of a flavor. Is there anything about rhodiola that shares, because cinnamon is also known to be either an insulin mimetic or insulin sensitizing agent. A lot of people with type 2 diabetes use it. Do they share any plant complexities?
So both plants, cinnamon and rhodiola, they have a number of phenolic compounds. I have actually worked with cinnamon in my lab too, mainly cinnamaldehyde, which is one of the alcohol molecules in cinnamon. Rhodiola has about 200 molecules, and I wish I could tell you which one is robustly contributing to the results that we observe, but I don't have the answer. And as far as similarities goes, I can just guess, because I haven't compared the molecules in cinnamon and rhodiola, in a parallel fashion.
Side by side, right.
Side by side, but I can assume that some of these phenolic compounds are shared. And the reason that rhodiola rosea, the name is rhodiola rosea, is that if you smell the root extract, a fresh root extract, you can smell a little bit of rose in it. So the name rosea is because of that. But I haven't done any comparison, side-by-side comparison, to tell you that there are similarities.
So, resveratrol became popular, sometimes for the wrong reasons, like when people said it's exercise in a pill, but that turned out to be a farce. But because of its ability to enhance blood glucose levels, but also it upregulated a series of proteins called sirtuins that were associated with lifespan and health span. Does rhodiola improve the production of SIRT1 or any of the sirtuins that seem to be magical proteins?
So during the 17 years that we've been working with rhodiola rosea, we have been trying to figure out why this plant extract does what it does, increases the lifespan and improves the health span in fruit flies. And one of the experiments that we did was to do exactly what you just asked. So we used this fly version of a sirtuin knockout flies. That means that they didn't have sirtuin, proteins, and rhodiola rosea still extended their lifespan. And we published a paper talking about how rhodiola rosea improves the lifespan without really impacting the usual pathways that we see in dietary restriction. And to me, that was a tremendous finding, because it showed that rhodiola rosea works through different pathways and not sirtuin proteins or the dietary restriction, the usual dietary restriction pathways.
Right. Okay, so we're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, I want to talk about senescent cells. I did my first interview with a doctor from the Einstein School of Medicine on the East Coast. I forget where it was. It was somewhere in New England, where I learned for the first time about cellular senescence. And cellular senescence, glucose signaling, the rapid rise, the rapid fall is what makes cells senescent faster. And move forward to today, we have a host of therapies to eliminate senescent cells from the body. and Dr. Mikhail Blagascloni writes papers all the time that the reason for phenotypical aging is the accumulation of senescent cells. I want to ask you about rhodiola and senescent cells. Is there anything going on there? How's that sound?
That sounds good.
Okay. All right. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Superhuman Radio. Don't go away. And we have some questions. I will get to them towards the end of the interview. I promise. Stay with me.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low carb.
Never before has a product been so appropriately named as Botanic Tonics Feel Free. This plant-based elixir combines a variety of different effective compounds, all from raw plant materials that at different doses provide you with completely different experiences. A third of a bottle puts you in the zone and makes you very focused and is ideal for a non-stimulating pre-workout. It also has a mild analgesic effect for us older lifters who have soreness and little pains and aches that keep us from training as ferociously as we want. A half a bottle will create a mild euphoric effect that will allow you to forego consuming alcohol, but still be socially lubricated and have fun. I have never had a product deliver on its name the way Botanic Tonics Feel Free does, and I won't ever be without it, and you shouldn't either. Go to shrnetwork.biz/feelfree and use the code SHR40 for 40% off your first order. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. There are lots of concerns about food supply today. That's why you need White Oak Pastures. White Oak Pastures will deliver food right to your doorstep. You don't even have to go out and be disappointed by shopping in grocery stores. The finest beef, pork, lamb, duck, and more can be found at White Oak Pastures. And now they even have seafood. And best of all, White Oak Pastures has a negative carbon footprint, which means that you don't have to feel guilty for eating your ribeye. Go to shrnetwork.biz/white oak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 15% off. P3OM from Bioptimizers is a patented prebiotic and probiotic supplement with Lactobacillus plantarum OM. It has now been upgraded to P3OM 2.0 with the addition of a superfood formulation that makes it 2 times stronger, as well as optimizes L. plantarum's strength. So it's more powerful than ever, which means that not only will it help you completely digest all animal proteins, it also reduces cortisol, causes deep relaxation and better sleep, and reduces stress. Go to shrnetwork.biz/P3-OM today and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off.
Move over, superheroes. This is the Superhuman Channel.
Welcome back. We're waiting for the good doctor to join us again. There. Okay. Welcome back. So you heard my lead up. Senescent cells, blood sugar, they're all linked together. And this is the new paradigm. You know, before it was telomeres. We've left that behind now. We're saying that senescent cells are what cause phenotypical aging. Any effect from rhodiola, would you, especially since it's a blood sugar management tool, do you think there's an effect, maybe either removing or slowing down the accumulation of senescent cells?
So a very short and quick response to your question is that we do not have any studies on the impact of rhodiola on senescence or acting as a senolytic agent. There are a number of studies on a number of other products, and as you mentioned, cellular senescence is a hot topic in longevity and aging. And there are even some studies looking at pharmaceuticals that are considered senolytic drugs. But until we have good clinical trials and until we have good quality clinical studies, I don't think that we should be using senolytics outside, the studies. And as of right now, we don't have those studies, not that I know of. Something may have been published like 2 days ago that I'm not aware of, but the research is ongoing.
So around the time you started studying rhodiola, I started this show. The show is 17 years old, November. So what else would intrigue people, surprise people to know about the power of rhodiola? I never realized it had all these benefits.
Well, rhodiola rosea has been used for thousands of years in traditional medical practices, especially in harsh and Arctic regions of the world, some parts of China, Siberia, Russia, and more recently in European countries and US. So it all started by some data, some limited studies suggesting that rhodiola rosea can improve physical and mental performance. And I have to add that this is promising, this is interesting, but we still don't have a very large clinical trials looking at this impact. Having said that, we have preliminary data. We have smaller clinical studies who are pointing to that direction. And this is a message that I constantly try to communicate with the community, my colleagues, my friends, and my family, is that we need to have better quality science when it comes to the use of botanical extracts and, in my mind, any dietary supplements in general. Because as you know, we do not have FDA regulations for them. So you can go buy a supplement on the market and we don't know exactly what is in the supplements. I mean, FDA comes in when people start having side effects and they start doing, let's say, a safety analysis for that product. But people are interested in taking rhodiola rosea because of what I just said, that we do have some limited clinical studies showing that it may have benefit for mental and physical health. And lots of anecdotes. I mean, I have many friends, just like you, Carl, who take rhodiola rosea and swear by it. And this is great. This is how science usually starts. You observe, positive impacts. Then you may do an observational study. Then you come up with a hypothesis, and then you move to a very robust, randomized clinical trial. And unless we have that, it is really hard to have a definite answer.
Do you think that it's better to take it on an empty stomach, especially if it seems to benefit the microbiome? And if so, a powder? I do take it on. I don't take it on an empty stomach. I take it with this concoction I make in the morning, which is water based, but it has free-form essential amino acids. It has creatine. It has alpha ketoglutarate, and also AKG has been associated with longevity too, and health span. And then I take my 3 capsules and throw it in my mouth, and I drink that slowly. I watch the sun come up, and then I go down to the gym and I work out. Do you think I should take it out of the capsules and throw it in my mouth so that the microbiome can benefit from it early on?
So I just go back to science again. We have a few pharmacokinetic studies on the use of rhodiola, but we don't have any pharmacokinetic studies suggesting that if rhodiola should be taken on empty stomach or with food. I would just say that it could be very specific to the individual. So if it's not bothering you on taking it in an empty stomach, it should be okay. Because once again, it's a plant extract with a bunch of phenolic compounds in it. So it really depends. But I cannot think of a pharmacokinetic study. And pharmacokinetic is a science that look at how pharmaceuticals and botanical extracts interact with our body, how they get absorbed, how they get metabolized, how they are excreted. So that's what pharmacokinetic is. And we don't have good pharmacokinetic studies with rhodiola.
Cola Quench from YouTube asks, does anything help the bioavailability? And what is the bioavailability? Is it very good? It's some things are good, some things aren't. And is it the rosavins that seem to be providing the health benefits?
So again, we don't know the answer to the question. In my lab, I have started looking at these various molecules. We call them, I do not like to refer to them as bioactive. I would like to refer to them as biomarkers, because when we standardize rhodiola rosea, we use these molecules, the ones that you and I have been talking about, rosavins and selidroside, to make sure that we have a high quality product. And I cannot emphasize on high quality, because really finding the high quality product is on the consumer. So we have to do our own due diligence and make sure that we are consuming a high quality product. But as far as which one is more bioavailable, again, we don't have data. What I have done in my lab, which is in fruit flies, not in mice, is that when my flies had consumed rhodiola rosea, we have grind them up and we have made like a little homogeneous, solution. And we wanted to make sure that we detect these biomarkers and if they are metabolized or not. And we were able to detect them, which assures me that the flies were consuming rhodiola rosea, and they were not just looking at it, for instance, in the vials and cages. But as far as the bioavailability goes, this is a very big challenge and a very good question when it comes to botanical extracts and pretty much any dietary supplements, because we are all different. We all have different absorptions. And what bioavailability, I should probably say that it means how the compound, how the natural product or the pharmaceutical becomes available in our body. And the very first step of bioavailability is the absorption from our gut, and how that substance or compound gets from our gut to our bloodstream and becomes bioavailable in our body. And once again, to my knowledge, I do not think that we have any pharmacokinetic studies on rhodiola.
What's a good solvent for it? Does water solve it? Does fat solve it? Oil?
So when we do fruit fly studies, I have experimented with different solvents with rhodiola rosea, and probably the safest would be alcohol. So I use ethanol to make my stock solutions in the lab, and then I add them to the fly food or the yeast paste, which is mainly the protein that the fruit flies consume. And that has pretty good bioavailability. But in water, rhodiola rosea doesn't dissolve in water. You just have like a suspension. So with our mouse study, we have to shake, the bottle to make sure that when we are feeding the mice through gavage, our rhodiola rosea product, it was uniform, and we didn't have sedimentation, for instance, on the bottom. Yeah.
So it sounds like an alcohol extract might be beneficial instead of just taking the powder.
If you want to take it in a solution form, then probably. And by the way, these are the questions that you're asking me and the audience is asking. These are great research questions. So as you're asking me the questions, I'm taking notes, because I would love to go back to my lab and find answers to these questions, because we just don't know right now.
Yeah, and another delivery method that the pharmaceutical company is now adopting is liposomal, and so.
Yeah.
But then again, liposomes don't seem to be digested in the gut; they seem to be digested further downstream in the intestine. So it just depends.
Yeah, and it's funny you said that, Carl, because I looked into liposomal delivery method, but the problem is that we have a plant extract, And how am I going to pack 200 molecules of this plant extract into a liposome? We are not talking about just one molecule, which is the case for many of the senolytics, for instance, that we have out there. It's a mixture of a number of molecules.
Right.
And a liposomal delivery sounds very attractive, but it will have technical issues.
I can see a new cocktail, for the people who make fancy cocktails and drinks at the bar. One with rhodiola in it. It'll help to deliver, and you get a buzz at the same time. JG asks if you've ever experimented or considered raw cacao powder for insulin response. Is that anything that you've looked at?
I have not.
Okay.
But I love dark chocolate, so
Yeah, I know. I eat too much of it. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I buy the Lily's. It's sugar free.
I like it. Yes,
Yeah.
that's a good one. Although I'm not, I try not to, endorse any products, but any dark chocolate that has low amounts of sugar is good. Unfortunately, that's one of my addictions.
And I ate a whole bar of Lily's dark chocolate. Oh no, it's actually milk chocolate with macadamia nuts last night after dinner. The whole bar, because it says no sugar. I think, oh, what's the big deal? It's no sugar. So anyway.
Okay, so I have to. So I know this is not about my study or rhodiola rosea work, but we have to be very careful when we see the word low sugar on a product, because low sugar has a different definition for different people. For somebody who does not have diabetes or pre-diabetes, maybe consuming something that says low sugar is okay. But somebody who has diabetes, they have to be careful. And of course, the best way to know if that product is going to increase their glucose and also make them more insulin resistant is by continuous glucose monitoring devices. Okay. You have these devices on your, attached to your skin, and they monitor your glucose levels. And I tell I tell my friends and family who have diabetes to try to use them, not continuously, if somebody has, pre-diabetes, just to see how they respond to different foods, even low sugar food.
One of the first shows I did when I was still on an AM radio station with Clear Channel was everybody should buy a glucometer. Not because you have diabetes, but because you don't have diabetes and you want to stay that way. I said, you check your oil in your car. Elevating blood sugar happens over years. You can alter that, but you got to know. Like I talk about this all the time. My fasting blood sugar is 67, and I produce about 0.5 to 0.7 millimoles of ketones first thing in the morning, because I stop eating at 6 p.m. and I don't eat again until after I work out. That's my first meal. So my body is very metabolically flexible because for decades I've been doing this. But I wore a continuous glucose monitor for 3 weeks, and I experimented with foods. I wanted to see what raw eggs did versus cooked eggs. And I really had a great time, and I learned a lot about my body. And I think people who don't have diabetes should buy a CGM and wear it for 3 weeks and eat what you normally eat, because you got an app, and look at what happens. And then you go, wow, I'm not eating that anymore. Boom. Yes. You just added years to your life with that one little experiment. Yeah.
And although we don't have controlled studies to say that this is going to definitely be beneficial, anecdotally, I have to say that it is. And it is a very good idea. And I'm smiling because I did that too. I did that for 2 weeks, and I was surprised because I also teach undergrad students at UCI, and in one of the courses that I teach is called Life 101, mental and physical self-care. I talk about sugar. One of the lectures is about pro-inflammatory foods and sugar. And I really wanted to share some personal experiences with my students. So I did that continuous glucose monitoring, and it was an eye-opener. That experience was an eye-opener because every body is different. So the way that you may respond to raspberries, I use raspberries because my biggest shock was raspberry, which is pretty low glycemic. But raspberries increase my glucose in like, I don't want to say seconds, but minutes.
Really?
So we all respond differently. And you're absolutely right. It is good to have data. I mean, why not?
So my nephew Tim came to live with us for about a year and a half, and when he came to live with us, he had anxiety so much that he didn't even like to go out. He was only 17, 18 years old, and that's sad. So I got him into training and mild bodybuilding, not extreme bodybuilding, but and I got him into low carb. And in about 2 months, he was having no more anxiety, which led me to believe that the anxiety was a result of maybe a mild hypoglycemic state. Because hypoglycemia, you get anxiety, you get tremors, you get palpitations, you start sweating. And a lot of people think, oh, there's something wrong with me. No, you're having blood sugar management issues. And he's young, and young people shouldn't be going through that type of problem. But so he got away. Now he lives on his own now. And we were talking about 3-4 weeks ago. And he said, and he's eating everything and anything now. And he said, you know, my anxiety's coming back. I said, just go low carb again. I said, just switch gears and go right back into it. He called me last week and he said, my anxiety's gone.
Oh,
People,
wow.
you know, people have no, you know, it's really sad because doctors are good people and they become doctors because they want to help people. But the indoctrination process by the medical orthodoxy robs them of the opportunity to truly help people by not paying more attention to the effects of nutrition. And that's sad. And then some doctors get it, you know, later in their practice, they start, like I know a doctor who went carnivore and his eczema went away. And he's like, I can't believe this. I mean, I was taking biologics. He had like plaque on his elbows. It's all gone. And he's not on any drugs anymore. So the magic of nutrition has been ignored. But I mean, there's a kid that he would end up going to a doctor and they'd probably put him on something because he has such severe anxiety. It's really sad. Yeah. We're going to take our last commercial break. Stay with us and we'll wrap up the show. Stay with us, please. Remember those rectangular toaster pastries you used to love when you were a kid? Well, Legendary Foods has just made them better. The new cake-style tasty pastry is like nothing you've ever had before. With 20 grams of high-quality protein and less than 1 gram of sugar, you'll feel like you're cheating, but you're not. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10 to save 10% off your purchase of tasty pastries. Now available in cookies and cream, red velvet cake, birthday cake, blueberry, strawberry, brown sugar cinnamon, and hot fudge sundae. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use code SHR10 today. There are lots of concerns about food supply today. That's why you need White Oak Pastures. White Oak Pastures will deliver food right to your doorstep. You don't even have to go out and be disappointed by shopping in grocery stores. The finest beef, pork, lamb, duck, and more can be found at White Oak Pastures. And now they even have seafood. And best of all, White Oak Pastures has a negative carbon footprint, which means that you don't have to feel guilty for eating your ribeye. Go to shrnetwork.biz/white oak and use the code SUPERHUMAN to save 15% off. GHKCU is one of the most effective peptides for rebuilding more youthful skin, reversing skin damage, diminishing wrinkles, and tightening loose skin. I personally use Restoracell with GHKCU every day. It's making an undeniable difference in the quality of my skin. Restoracell is fantastic for all types of skin. Now you can order, restore, a cell and save 25% when you use the code SHR25. That's SHR25. While you may be diligent in your workouts and your diet, don't neglect what people see first and foremost, and that's your skin. Go to shrnetwork.biz/blue and use code SHR25 today. I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/MyPillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where we use oxygen for the power of good.
Welcome back. Welcome back. So, Dr. Jafari, do you take rhodiola?
No,
What?
I don't.
Oh, that's it. I'm ending the interview. Why not?
Actually it's a funny story, but I'm going to make it very short. So as you know, people who take rhodiola, they should take it in the morning because rhodiola can causes insomnia, and it could act. It's not a stimulant, but it could act. The results could be like one. So I have tried to take even 100 milligrams of rhodiola, and it made me very hyper. And I developed insomnia for 3 days, which was interesting because I wrote a paper during the nights that I was awake. But and this is I would like to take it as an opportunity to just share with your audience that these natural products do have pharmacological properties. So just because they are presented and marketed as something that is natural, that doesn't mean that they don't have pharmacological properties. And this is why when people ask me questions about this study and they say that, oh, I have diabetes, I'm going to start also taking rhodiola rosea, I tell them don't, because the chances are they are on other medications, they are on metformin, maybe they are on sulfonylureas, and we don't know how rhodiola is going to interact with these drugs. And it's better to definitely have a very open conversation with the healthcare provider before starting taking rhodiola for diabetes. And also, we don't have a good human study. Right. I hope I can come back to your show 2 years from now and tell you that here we go. We have the clinical results.
But it does. Like Elisa will say to me, "Oh wow, you're wired up this morning," and it's usually right about an hour after I train. I have great energy when I train. I wake up in the morning. I'm 64 years old. I'm not as spry as I once was, but I wake up in the morning and I have my concoction and my rhodiola, and I go downstairs and I train very strenuously, and then I come up, and after the sedation of exhaustion from the training wears off, I'm like, I'm a little frantic almost. And it's probably because of the rhodiola. I never thought about it before, but it's probably because of the rhodiola. So yeah, it's amazing. You know, I've been doing this show for 17 years, and when I was very young and I first started doing the show, I thought I knew so much. Oh, and I had a good friend whose mother was an insulin-dependent diabetic, and I said, "Oh, you need to start taking R-alpha lipoic acid." I said, R-ALA is an insulin mimetic. And, I knew all these fancy words because I learned them from the doctors that I interviewed. And she goes, "Oh, okay." So she bought it. They rushed her to the hospital the next day because her blood sugar dropped too far. And her doctor says, "If you want to take our ALA, I'm fine with it, but we got to back down your insulin then, because it made her so hypoglycemic, just that one capsule that she took." So you're right. And I say this all the time. The great thing about supplements is that they work. But the bad thing about supplements is they work. And, you got to treat the drugs.
Yeah. But you also have to remember that, again, because of the lack of regulation by FDA about what goes in the supplement, some supplements are adulterated. They may have pharmaceutical agents, and the consumers may not know about it because that pharmaceutical compound is not listed on the bottom. So we have to be very careful when it comes to dietary supplements, and we have again to do our homework to make sure that the supplement that we are taking has high quality.
And that's why companies like Life Extension Foundation and people gravitate towards their products, because they do HPLC and mass spec. They make sure that what they're putting on the label is all that's in the supplement. But you're right. There's a lot of companies, I was invited to get involved in a supplement company, and the people that wanted to do this with me, they wanted to use my name in my show, and they were going to buy raw materials from China. And I said, well, how do you know that this stuff is clean? How do you know it's pure? How do you know there's not pathogens in it? How do you know that there's, and they said, oh, well, they send a certificate with it. What do they call that? COA.
Yes, certificate of analysis.
And I looked at the certificate of analysis, and it was 2 years old. I says, that can't be the same stuff they're selling today from 2 years ago. And I said, no, you got to have it tested once it gets here to make sure it's really what. Then they didn't want to go in the business because that was going to cost a lot of money, and every time you had to have something mass spec. But you're right. That's why you have to buy your supplements from a reputable company, a big brand name, Nature's Way. These companies, they have a lot on the line if their supplements hurt people. But these fly-by-night companies, you got to be very, very careful with. So you're right. You don't really know. You don't. Okay, look, Dr. Jafari, I want to thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today. This is fascinating stuff.
Thank you.
And I feel now I'm going to feel even better in the morning when I take my rhodiola. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Take care. And please, when you have more research, please let us know so we can get you back on the air, okay?
I will do that. And if I may just end our interview by saying that, because you mentioned, some dietary supplement companies want you to be their spokesperson. I will get those requests all the time too, but I'm a scientist at in a University of California University, UCI in Irvine. And I am really serious about not having any conflict of interest. So my research, even the book I wrote about dietary supplements, everything that I do has no conflict of interest, and I like to keep it that way, because I would like to remain, I like to think that will make me more unbiased and adds more value to my research. But thank you again for inviting me.
Well, it's funny you say that, because when you said you don't even take rhodiola, I thought to myself, well, she definitely doesn't have a conflict of interest. She doesn't even take it. So that's great. Yes. Great having you here. Take care.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And that's it for today. I am off the air tomorrow. It's Friday, and it's going to be sunny, which means I'll be on my motorcycle, for those of you who care. But we have some great shows lined up for next week. Don't forget, share the show. You never know who you can help. You may help one person by sharing a show, so get busy and do it. And we'll see you Monday with more Superhuman Radio. Have a safe weekend. And don't forget, muscle is metabolic currency, so get into the gym and make a deposit today. Because if you're stronger today than you were last week, you're younger today than you were last week. Take care.